Welcome to a new episode of SmarTalk TV. With us today, famous guest, La. Sami Abou Saab, CEO of Speed. Can I say the oldest accelerator in Lebanon?
The oldest continuous running one, yes.
Continuous running, because many have since died or stopped.
Correct.
And that'd be interesting to understand why are accelerators dying in Lebanon.
Sure.
Sami, you graduated from the USA. You had your MBA at Berkeley.
Correct.
What did you do after that? Tell us about you a bit more.
Sure. So originally,
when people meet you at conferences, they know how to what to tell you, what to speak about with you.
No, definitely. So I originally studied at AUB here in Beirut and then went to the States for my MBA at UC Berkeley. During the 2-year MBA program, I took the entrepreneurship class, and that's where I actually started a startup, as everyone does in the entrepreneurship class. And we had hopefully it was a great idea that we worked on during that semester. It got a lot of attention, and multiple people thought that we should fully pursue it. Unfortunately, it failed due to one of the typical reasons of a startup failure, which was the team, because not all of us could continue on it full time. There were some also, let's say, immigration and paperwork process that we needed to go through, and it was not given. So already it's a high risk to start a company and then add to it the risk of getting your paperwork and other things. So we decided not to pursue it. After that, I took a job at Skype. I was a product manager there for Skype and Skype for Business, which was acquired by Microsoft. So we were under a team that was in Redmond, next to Seattle. And I took that job for 3 years. That on its own was a great experience there. Like, I learned to do so many things at scale. You're talking about a product that was doing more than $1 billion in revenue with just a small number of people on product management. So you could imagine how many things you're doing part of that team and what kind of experience that gives you. 3 years there, I decided to come back to Beirut, and then the Speed opportunity came up. And I saw that there was some potential there to do some impact on the local economy, on the local, if you want, ambitious and young scene. And that's what made me very, if you want, excited to come back and take such a role.
So who's behind Speed?
Originally, Speed was founded and launched by the VCs. These are Middle East Venture Partners and Mr. Walid Hanna, Beritech Fund 2 and Mr. Maroon Shammas, and joined by independents, which are Abdullah Jabour from Lebanon for Entrepreneurs and Fadi Bizri from what used to be a pre-accelerator back then called Badr. And of course, I Am Capital also came on board with Mr. Nicola Rohana. So these were the 5, if you want, founding members of Speed at BDD. And the goal and their mission from day one, and that's what they recruited me to execute on, was to launch an accelerator with the vision and mission to create high-quality startups to invest in the future. So there was 331 going on, and they wanted to create a high-quality startup accelerator to make sure that it's the engine to get the right startups on board and to eventually invest in them in the future.
So what's Speed?
It's a technology startup accelerator.
The core of the topic today.
Fair. So Speed is your typical technology startup accelerator. By typical, I mean we have a very standard program. We run 2 cycles a year. So startup accelerators recruit startups, and they run a program over a specified period of time with a certain structure that includes cash investment, a lot of workshops, training, mentorship, and a typical launch event and demo day that come with that. So we're a technology startup accelerator focused on early stage, could be idea stage or a bit of prototype or early even customers at some points. And we focus a lot on the team. This is the most important thing we look at in any startup coming our way. We provide 3 months of full support with our huge network of mentors that spans around the world. So 50% of our mentors are not even in Lebanon. Some of them are Lebanese internationally, some of them are fully international. And we also are part of multiple other networks, including the Global Accelerator Network, including some program with Techstars, including also our partnership with LabNet and Blackbox in Silicon Valley. So we provide the startups with 30K in cash, equivalent in-kind services, more than 15 workshops, access to that network. And over a 3 months period, we try to push them to get their product out there in the market, try to get their first customers, and go to demo day to tell the people what they were able to execute given 30K in cash and the 3 months acceleration. After that, we ask these startups to apply to a Silicon Valley program that's LabNet and Blackbox. And up to 2 startups get selected to go there. We fully sponsor that process from A to Z, including even airline ticket and accommodation. And those 2 startups go for a 2-week immersion program in Silicon Valley. In addition to that, we saw that there was a small gap in funding after acceleration. And for that, we started an initiative in the last 2 cycles at Speed. We called it the Seed Boost. It's an infamous and famous name. Some people confuse it for Speed Boost or things, but it's called Seed Boost. And the purpose is to boost the startups at their seed stage. We get 5 different investors, each one of them to invest $10,000 in cash for a total of $50,000 in cash that goes into the startup as equity financing in return for 5% equity. Also standard. Of course, people can debate whether this valuation is high or low.
Just to understand, so this is beyond the initial cash investment. So
exactly.
One startup will be selected to get an extra $50,000 for an extra 5%.
Exactly, and this selection happens by the 5 investors, not by Speed, those who put the money on the table. And we do like an investment committee style setup where these 5 investors come, the startups pitch to the investors, and at the end of the day, they choose one that we announce during demo day.
So the equity is held by these 5 investors.
Exactly.
So Speed has taken 10% from the initial entry into the accelerator, and these 5 investors come in as normal follow-on investors taking 50.
100%. We're just facilitating the process.
Sami, thank you for the introduction. I think it's pretty clear what what Speed is. Now let's get into a little bit more, what we can't find on the website. What is it? What is really happening? I'm an entrepreneur. I created my startup. I applied to Speed. Today, Speed has a great reputation in the market. So people know Speed is here. They know Speed.
Thank you.
Does a good job. But deep down, most entrepreneurs don't know what they're getting into. And it's difficult to find that information.
Fair.
What is it really happening? What is really happening when you're selected?
Yeah, so I think what, let's say, sets us a bit apart is kind of the hands-on approach we have in the acceleration process. So we have a team of 5 people, and all of us are hands-on in even coaching the startups, not only in doing the other stuff that we should be doing as an accelerator. Meaning, on a weekly basis, each startup goes through a status meeting and a pitching session. And that's to make sure that they hone their skills in pitching their story to investors in the future, to make sure that we have all the full updates on what they're doing, give them some direction on what they shouldn't be doing, more than what they should be doing, by the way. So I think the job of an accelerator is not to tell a startup what to do, but mostly what not to do and what mistakes and pitfalls to avoid. And we do this as a team. So I personally try to help them on the strategy aspect. Faris, our CTO, tries to help them on the technology aspect of things, and he's the one who's running the program overall. We have also Kevin, who's focused on the business aspect of things, on the business plan, on the financing, and these kind of things. We have Elsa, who helps them on their very early pitch deck and on their day-to-day operations. And we have Gracia, who's our marketing manager, who also helps them in their social media, in their marketing plans, and their strategies on how to handle certain things. So we have that hands-on approach as a whole team in coaching, in addition to the network that we have outside of Speed. The other thing, I guess, is that they get a weekly meeting with an investor. So every Wednesday we have an investor meeting where an investor comes on board and each startup sits with the investor for half an hour. So imagine this is happening for the full period of the acceleration every week, and what kind of exposure and experience this gives to the startups. So you get the feeling at the end that they're comfortable in sitting with investors, they know what to tell them, they know what investors care most about, and they try eventually to develop this as they move along. And I think also another aspect of the program is that we try to make sure also to customize what we're offering to the startups based on their needs and their industries. So when we got 2 startups in gaming, we went all the way to get them the best mentors that we could get that are focused on gaming, that know the industry really well. And eventually that paid off. One of them right now is pursuing an extra acceleration in a more specialized program, which is the Rakuten program powered by Techstars in Singapore. And this is something we're really proud of because that sets them at a stage that's global and that gets them access to markets that they wouldn't have got in Lebanon.
We have a fly that joined us in the studio, probably that wants to apply to an accelerator. Look, again, I mean, before we get into the funding of all this, one of the problems, I mean, it's obviously a very complete, it's a very annoying fly. It's a very complete program, what you're offering. But the reality, what's happening in the ecosystem in Lebanon, is a lot of these startups are coming and joining accelerators or applying to accelerators because there is some seed money being provided to them. Is this a problem? From your perspective, I mean, let's think more strategically because, again, SmarTalk at the end is to provide some advice to entrepreneurs, and we're going to get back to tell them about the ecosystem. But a lot of them, and we see a lot of candidates, you know, applying, and they're all coming, a lot of times are coming just to get the money. Is this a problem? Is this a real problem?
Yes, it is a problem. And the reason I'm saying it is a problem because the value of an accelerator is not in the money. It's in the program, and the support, and the coaching, and the overall...
Are they understanding this?
Some of them do, and some of them don't. And when we see someone is so focused on the money and the value of money to equity and these kind of things, it's a turn-off, honestly. We try to either make them understand the value of the program, and if they do, they're welcome on board. If they don't, we sometimes even push them away because we don't want someone to be there only for the $30,000 cash and not be coachable and not be taking the right feedback, not be willing to explore the opportunities that the network provides that entrepreneur with.
If I'm an entrepreneur, and I am, but when they come and ask you a question,
you are.
but they come and because we all know the difficulty, and we're going to speak later on in the interview about the ecosystem overall and the problems facing the entrepreneurship. Now, obviously, you have a very privileged view of what's happening because you're living with the startups and with the funds. I mean, so you have both lives. The problem is a lot of these startups come and tell us, well, I don't have money. There's no seed money in Lebanon. I need that money. And why is the accelerator, complaining if I come and discuss the valuation? Why is the accelerator arguing with me? But that's the way it's supposed to be because that's my only way to be able to grow my company.
Yeah. To be honest, it's not an issue for a startup to come and discuss equity. That said, Speed on its own, and this is something we made we were very religious about it from day one, that since we have a structured approach, we're not going to change that structure for anyone for whatever reason. Meaning whatever cash to equity ratio we have applied to all the startups that went through Speed, the 34 startups, and all their contracts are exactly the same in that sense. That said, it's not about discussing the equity to cash ratio and the startup trying to be ambitious and not to give away too much equity for maybe the wrong reasons in some cases. It's more about them trying to understand the value of the accelerator and how this accelerator would make them ready for the actual seed money they're looking for. Many startups think they can go directly to VCs and get the money right away from venture capital funds, but they don't see that there are so many other things that they need to do to get that money. And I think the other major problem that we saw in that particular sense is that if the VC is willing to talk to a startup, it doesn't mean it's going to give it money. And many entrepreneurs
That's for sure.
take that as a sign that's positive. Oh, they gave me a meeting, then I'm going to get their money. I don't need acceleration. And the acceleration as well does not contradict that. Like, even if the VC is willing to give them the money, the acceleration job is to put them at a stage where they can make the best use of that money, of the accelerator money and of the VC money in the future, and to put them on the right track to the right scaling up mindset and approach and vision, so that they're not just having money and maybe not using it in the most optimal way that they could. So I think there is a mindset perspective here that needs to be taken into consideration.
Let's dwell back again into speed a little bit more and continue that line and that thread. Are there any sectors you guys favor?
So that's a very
I know
good
you
question.
love gaming. That's a personal thing.
We actually did a track on gaming, and we're still open for more gaming startups, because I think it's a little bit something that didn't get its full right in the local ecosystem, and it has a lot of potential, and the market is huge. And anyone who doesn't see that, they should see it. That said, we had a little bit of everything. We're getting a lot of marketplaces. Even though marketplaces are one of the most difficult things to really execute well on, if, I don't know, Uber or Airbnb or other big ones made it, these are the exceptions, not the rule. And people see them and use them every day, and they think, oh, I can disrupt any industry with a marketplace. Not really. It's much more difficult than that. There are studies and papers and research done on marketplaces that tells you how difficult it is to pursue such a thing. That said, we got lucky and we got some deep tech startups. By deep tech, I mean artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision. And these startups actually performed really well, and they're still going with a lot of potential to reach something really big. We love those because they have also the intellectual property potential and some patents in some cases. And once you have that, you have a barrier to entry. You have potential to get more investors, because investors look at these intellectual properties as assets that they could one day liquidate if they have to, or get some money out of it in selling licenses or whatever it is. So those were particularly successful in that case. And most of them, for good or for bad, they came back from diaspora, given that they went to international universities, went through R&D centers there, and got their PhDs there. And we got them back here in Beirut for the acceleration. So we were lucky with deep tech. We got some ed tech, we got some fintech, we got some something into fashion or interior design. Pretty diverse, the rest. But
there's no particular verticals you're really focusing on into this, as long as
we're general tech. And it would be nice to be able to have more verticals to focus on, but the ecosystem, I think, is not there yet.
It's not fully ready.
Yeah, I'm a proponent of vertical focus, but I think it's a timing matter.
Any successes at Speed?
So if we talk a bit numbers,
it's a bit early on, but I mean,
no,
overall,
that's actually, it's always good to reflect back and see where we're at and see where we can take this to the next step. We accelerated 34 startups in 5 cycles. Out of these, we have 10 that raised follow-on funding, and that's a total of around $2.5 million in early stage. Maybe a bit more now, because some of them are raising their second round and some more investments are coming on board. We had one exit, which was pretty decent at an early stage.
Which one?
That was Squirrel.
Okay.
And at the same time, if we look at the other side of the coin, the flip side of the coin, we had some failures and some startups closed doors already.
It's part of the game.
Exactly. That's part of the numbers. But if we were to look at these and compare numbers with maybe the top Silicon Valley numbers, they tell you in Silicon Valley that every 10 accelerated startups, 4 fail, 4 break even or become lifestyle SMB businesses, and 2 really excel and they cover up for the losses in the remaining 8. I think at this early stage, we are still at par or even above those numbers. Now, of course, we expect even those who raise funding at some point, not all of them will succeed. But if we continue with that trend, the hope is that we at least do something that's decent for a nascent ecosystem. We're not mature. We're not 20-year-old ecosystem with all the networks and investors that Silicon Valley has.
You're opening the door to the topic of the ecosystem.
Yes.
What the hell is wrong with this ecosystem? Why are we coming to a point, we've come to a point where many people feel that something is not moving, something is not working anymore?
I think it's a little bit overhyped, the negativity towards the ecosystem. And I'm not talking from a position where, okay, maybe things are going well for us, then no, I see everything positive. It's not the case, no. Of course, the ecosystem has some issues and concerns. But at the same time, if we look at overall what happened and what's going on, I think it's normal. So you started an ecosystem in Lebanon. The central bank put a lot of money for that and subsidized all the investments. And we're very thankful for that, by the way. Without it, we couldn't have, none of us would be here probably today without that. And it's normal that you have multiple players who benefited from those investments and that money. And there is a normalization process that happens with time, where you have some people who did a good job and that hopefully are still going and are still doing a good job and trying to take this to the next step. Some people were unlucky, maybe. I wouldn't say that they didn't do a good job. Some people didn't have all the stars aligned for things to work. And those probably might close or might not be able to continue their journey, might pivot to something else, and they might use that learning to put it at a different use. And I think what's happening right now is normal. So I think also there is a reassessment from the central bank itself on what went on, well, what went wrong, and to kind of to provide some more direction moving forward. But that doesn't mean that the whole ecosystem stopped. It means that there is just that kind of year where things reached a certain momentum and a certain tipping point. And now we need to look back, what went right, what went wrong, and assess, and based on it, move forward. I think even at Speed, we are doing this right now. Like, we're in the middle of it right now. That's why we kind of paused a little bit between cycles. We are doing through some internal revamp and internal restructuring based on the learning of 5 different cycles of acceleration, 34 startups and everything. And we're hoping that our relaunch or repositioning in the market is also going to be something that will help startups further, will provide the most value, and will be something that makes the ecosystem even better.
What direction are you thinking of?
So we are always thinking about the entrepreneurs first. Like, we really care about them, and that's something that we have tried to convey in everything we do, including our legal contract with the startups and the founders. And part of that, we're also trying to see what other things we can bring to the table to provide them with more value, even if that means we need to look at our cash to equity ratio. So we're doing all of this right now. We're even looking at the internal team structure and to see that how this coaching that we do internally as well can be even taken to the next step, if we need to have some additions to the team or some restructuring of what we do internally, so that we make sure that each team member is fully committed and able to provide the full value to the startups. So these are kind of a couple of highlights of things we're looking at.
When will you be announcing a little bit the new approach?
We're hoping to be able to do so in the next month or two.
All right. I mean, I guess part of the reason you're doing this, I'm also into the acceleration business, as you know, and if we look around, a lot of the accelerators have stopped.
True.
And a lot are changing models. I mean, the ones left are sort of relooking at their model, trying to change what they do to be able to sustain financially. Is running an accelerator a money-losing business? Is it a public service job? Or is it something that can really make money for potential entrants?
Worldwide, if we look at the worldwide accelerators, very few made money. and they had particular business models or particular market/timing/combination of things that worked for them. And these are the exceptions, not the rule. So typically, yes, accelerators are money-losing businesses. Is it a public thing that should be fully subsidized? It's a bit debatable because you can always transform your business model into something that makes money. And part of what we're trying to do in this revamp at Speed is also to make us much more sustainable on the longer term. Like so far, we got a lot of support from VCs, central bank, and subsidized money. This is not going to be something that's going to happen for the long run. They're not charity. They're not doing this for charity purposes. They're doing it because there is a need for the ecosystem to be built from the ground up. Probably same reason why you guys are operating at ISA as well, and what you're doing is similar to that. Now, if I were to go discuss a bit further what to do to become more sustainable, I think we've done like a lot of research on that. I can share a little bit the high-level outcome, and of course, happy to help anyone to move in that direction. I think there is a need to help each other in that sense and provide that value. And the high-level outcome of our findings is the following: that the sustainable business models for accelerators could fall into one of three things. If we take even Y Combinator, it would fall into one of them. Techstars falls into one of them. Either you have an accelerator with a follow-on fund that's supporting it, and then here you get the value of picking the winners from the acceleration, supporting them, and then the fund would be the one that hopefully would make the return on investment, not the accelerator itself. But you would have the privilege of having a lot of insider information into the startups, into the teams, into cherry picking the top ones from the program. And this is what Y Combinator did to evolve with time. This is similar to even some of the programs here in the region that are doing that. That's one. The second model that has been also successful is more, if you want, the Techstars model, where you would go and franchise your accelerator and you try to sell it as a service. So it's acceleration as a service, it's franchising, it's corporate innovation. It can take multiple names, but the end result is one, which is you're actually taking that experience and expertise you have built over the years and supporting startups, consulting them on the right things in innovation and R&D and other things. And you bring that to some players that do not have it. And those players would be willing to pay money for that because you already have figured out something that works.
This fly is loving us.
This fly is a little bit annoying. So, sorry. So you can go and sell that kind of expertise and experience to some partners who are willing to pay for it, and you become profitable from that. That's the second model. The third model, which is a little bit more unique and I would say a bit more difficult to execute because it requires very specific and advanced set of skills, are specialized accelerators. These are the vertical focused ones who go into one industry and they go very deep. It could be gaming, it could be AI. There's like AI accelerators right now in the world. There are fintech ones, other things. They don't have to be corporate focused like some of the fintech today or other things happening in the world. They could be like hacks in China, for instance, that's focused on hardware. And the value there is that you have people who are very deep experts in their area of expertise, and you're getting startups who are focused on those industries. First, the value you are providing them is extremely high because you have on board some people that you cannot find anywhere else in the world, and that's why you're getting those startups. That equity you're taking from the startups, you know that the return on investment in it is a bit higher, and that's due also to that deep expertise you're providing them with, the industry connections you are giving them, and the access to market and the actual customers you're bringing them to the table. That's where the industry focus works. But that is not an easy and given one to do. Like you have to have,
yeah. We don't have the pipeline in Lebanon to do so. I mean, it's very difficult at least to do.
It cannot be a Lebanese play. It has to be a regional international play. Even I would say any vertical focus accelerator has to be global. It cannot be regional even, because to get maybe 10 startups every year that are focused on one industry and you can provide them with some value, you have to align multiple things together and focus into one vertical and like if you tell me Mercedes-Benz or BMW is doing an accelerator for automotive, yeah, it makes sense. Like that kind of things you would look at.
Sami, to wrap up a little bit on all this, today, from everything, all this time you've been spending with entrepreneurs, if there were a few things, let's say 5 things, whatever, I mean, it's not about a number, that you advise entrepreneurs to do or not to do, what would they be? Sami's take on life.
No, I think number one thing that matters in any startup, and I would say at any stage, and we've seen this even in the US with Groupon or even Uber or others, is the team and kind of leadership as well.
So team number one.
Team is definitely number one, and the individuals on the team. So you have to have the right team that have complementary skills, that have the right chemistry and capability and ability to work like long hours together without getting into fight every second. These are like, I would say, international things that happen not only in Lebanon. Like we think it's a culture thing. No, it's everywhere. So
we just make it worse.
Yeah, maybe. Or we see it in a more negative way, let's say. For some reason, like people think it's only local. It's not. It just happens everywhere. And part of the team as well, you have to make sure that if you're building a technology startup, you cannot outsource the technology. So you have to build it in-house. And if you don't have that right technical skills on board,
makes it more difficult.
It's, I would say, impossible. Like I would be confident enough to say that if you're building a technology startup and you don't have the technology in-house, better not build it from day one. So team is definitely extremely important. The second thing that is very important and advice I would give the startups is to look at the market. If they're in a market that is either dying or not growing enough, or is a niche market, or that doesn't have enough worldwide potential, just local or regional potential, they might be looking at the wrong market. Like have your kind of limits or standards set really high. Think global. The sky is the limit. So if you're not building something that can be replicated across multiple geographies and multiple regions that's very specific to your area, you're probably not thinking big enough. And market is extremely important for investors, for raising funds, and
for an entrepreneur himself. I mean,
for
the project,
exactly.
Before the investor, I mean, it's about just making it work.
We've seen a lot of people who are super technical and they build great product and over-engineer them, perfect them, whatever you want. But then if no one is willing to pay for it, then it's not going to go anywhere. So that's the second thing, which is extremely important to the market. And finally, I think there is always this question from entrepreneurs: do I get the users first or I get revenue first? Especially when they're talking about marketplaces or some place where they want to attract, like a social media app, they want to attract customers to make money from ads. Whenever you have the option to make revenue, pursue it first. Like, I cannot emphasize this enough. Many of the startups that built great stuff and eventually failed at some point was that they weren't too focused on the cash flow. And cash flow is king in any startup in the early stages, especially when you're fundraising and running around after investors trying to get money. In Lebanon, it's taking a bit more time to raise funds than internationally. It's taking 9 to 12 months to get your investment. Internationally, it could be 3 to 6 months in some places. That said, since you know that it's going to take that much time, plan it and try to get the cash in as soon as you can. Like, even build something that actually people would value and pay money for it first, and then you build the other bigger story and the other features you need to put into your product.
On these words of wisdom, we're ending this very interesting session with you, Sami.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
The pleasure was mine, actually. Thank you.
Good luck to Speed in that reflection you're talking about into re-engineering Speed to continue for the next few years to continue helping that ecosystem because we do need it.
Thank you. No, I appreciate the time, and for you doing this for the whole ecosystem. I think that's very valuable. The whole talks series.
Thank you.
I've been watching them, and they're pretty interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.